Welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined again by my shotgun riding, shotgun shooting, co-host and poetry writing lover.
Definitely Alex Dandino.
There you go. I think that landed. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that was good. That was nice. I like that.
All right, guys. As always, if you like the show, please take a second and leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcasts app. That does help us out tremendously. For those of you that have been doing it, we do appreciate it enormously. Thank you very much.
We have seen a solid uptick.
That's right.
So
Our numbers are looking good. We're assaulting these charts, which is awesome. Also, you can see our faces along with hear our voices on our YouTube channel. That's Nerd Alchemist, plural with an S at the end. Working our way to some new content over there. That'll be the home for that, so stay tuned, guys. Also, find us on your socials. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Everywhere you are, we are, and we want to talk to you. At Film Alchemist #1 on Twitter is where I mostly hang out. We do a lot over there. And you can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, with your ideas for movies you'd like to hear covered, guest hosts, special features, double features, themes for a month. We've gotten some really good ones from you guys, actually. Our coffers overflow with great movie ideas. But to that point, what we're working on right now, we decided June, the month of my birth, right? A present to me and to you, the listeners. We were going to do your fan submissions. So we picked our favorite ones, and we're hacking our way through the list right now. There were so many good ones. We tried to make a ranking, and we're going to get through as many as we can. But tonight, we are here for Natural Born Killers. Oliver Stone directed. Quentin Tarantino written. Woody Harrelson acted. Juliette Lewis acted. Superbly acted. Alex, when was the last time you had seen Natural Born Killers?
College, maybe?
You know, I was thinking that same thing. I was like, it had been a long time. And just so everyone knows, this is from listener, friend of the pod, and a guest we've had on the show before, Carmelita Valdez McCoy. We adore Carmelita. You can hear her talk about Carmelita, Mommy Dearest, Carrie, Luz, and Bliss.
Truly one of my favorite fans of the pod.
She is the reason. I'm like, Twitter is a pretty horrible, barren wasteland oftentimes. But we've met so many amazing people, and she's absolutely one of my favorites. So when she gave us a suggestion, I knew that was going to skyrocket up the list. Also, I think Natural Born Killers will be a fun conversation because, one, it feels like a movie that is desperately lost in its time, yet might be more relevant today than even when it was made. It feels a little bit like Oliver Stone kind of fell ass backwards into a timeless movie. Well, and I don't think you like it that much. Is that the correct assumption?
I don't, actually. It's interesting. Like, I knew, like, when Carmelita suggested Natural Born Killers, I was like, we're going to have to do this. And, like, again, this isn't a movie that I seek out to watch a lot. And I understand its merits. Like, it is an Oliver Stone joint, early Oliver Stone, too, like, early 90s Oliver Stone. And this is, like, in the middle of his, like, string of, like, 9 critically successful movies, I think. It's a movie that was originally written by Quentin Tarantino, but apparently was changed so much he only gets story by credit. Like, they literally rewrote this movie.
Well, I mean, this is how bad it got. Is I read a story somewhere, and I might be getting some details wrong, but apparently, if I'm not mistaken, they met at a hotel or like a lodge at Sundance Film Festival, and spit flew. And Tarantino came at Oliver Stone with a hatchet. So I don't know exactly how bad this got, and I don't know. I don't know the exact, beat for beat, blow by blow layout. But you absolutely have to hope that
you have to hope that is like true. But no matter what, it is a wonderful like movie lore story. That's one of those like great like, that's one of those great like Kirk Douglas throwing his foot down for Dalton Trumbo to be listed as the writer of Spartacus type deals. Like that's one of those great like Hollywood stories, or like, but yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because like the movie itself is absolutely like it's one of the first ones that's really a great indictment of the 24-hour news cycle. And this was even before the 24-hour news cycle was like a major part of our lives. Yeah. But also an indictment in general of how we cover tragedy in this country and how we cover what like our knowledge base, and particularly hyper relevant now, our knowledge base is so wide, and like the ability for us to have access to information is so much greater that this movie's relevance is so much like the sensationalism of murder and the sensationalism of violence is really kind of like the point of the movie. Because again, this movie is very in your face, and it's right in the middle of Oliver Stone's like obsession with 40 different types of media in a movie. Again, I just, it's to me a very frenetically paced film, and the way it's shot doesn't do a lot for me. So that's like always been my hang up with watching this movie. I have no problem with the story or like the characters or anything like that. My problem is with the way this movie is made and directed bothers me a great deal.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I can see that, right? Because he's coming off
still a good movie.
In some order. I can't actually get it to list by years here on Letterboxd. But you've got Wall Street, Platoon, JFK, Born on the 4th of July, Natural Born Killers is in here. Talk Radio is such an underrated, awesome movie.
Oh my God,
JFK
so underrated.
area, like, he's made a lot of great movies.
This was, I think, right before JFK or right after?
Yeah, this feels like here's a great example to me of, I get what Oliver Stone wants to say. I don't feel like he is the art house guy who's trying to deliver this art house movie that he wants to make. I think what is nice is you suffer some of the, because this is what I was saying is that this movie forsakes all subtlety to make a point, which is his point is that the news media is this bludgeoning mutagen that is making us all these tremendous monsters. We'll get. I'll save that point for a minute. But the opening scene even has one of these things where I was like, it feels like Oliver Stone doesn't even necessarily know why he's cutting to black and white when he is. Because, like, the opening scene, right? They're ordering pies. And Woody Harrelson, you know, he's dressed up as, like, Super Mickey, right? That's what I call him, right? There's, like, the Super Mickey, the comic book Muscle Mickey, you know, the idealized version of Mickey.
Yeah.
He's asking for a pie, right? And the waiter's like, well, we got key lime pie. And then it cuts to black and white. And she's like, we got key lime. And she's a little more animated. And so I'm like, oh, so the cutting to black and white, this is some kind of the subtext of what they're saying or what they wish they could say, the inner demon release. Within 3 minutes, in the exact same scene, when we cut to Juliette Lewis, her character, right, Mallory, dancing to the jukebox and fighting the fucking rednecks. Yeah. The black and white is just a visual cut. It's just showing us exactly what's happening in the real world. And that was one of those things to me that I just immediately latched on to, is like, why do that, right? It feels like this sloppy just giving it like more of an art house indie movie vibe. But I think perhaps there's a way to examine that where the fact that it's so disjointed and, you know, sloppy and this and that, I think the movie goes so far out of its way to constantly remind us that this is a movie, right? This is one of those movies that, while it is a reflection of us, right, in our society and trying to show us a harsh truth, it's letting you know specifically. This is not like one of these, you know, documentary style following two killers around the West, you know, seeing their real world. It's showing us a truth through complete, you know, maniacal
I mean,
imagery.
There's so much. Again, I mean, like the best example of that to me is Mallory's backstory, which is shot like a Leave It to Beaver sitcom.
But see, that works perfect. I think that is one of the best scenes I've watched in a long. Like I love that.
It works very well. Right, it works very well, and that's to me like that is Oliver Stone using the visual medium for a reason that I think is like really specific. Because if we had seen that, imagine that in any other director's hands, that's like a shot scene of just grotesquerie and sort of like sadness. Because to me, like that's if again, the only way it gets worse is if you have to and I mean they even do it a little bit by filming it with regular film, and you see like the close up on Rodney Dangerfield's eyes and that kind of thing. Like there is that moment that it becomes very lecherous and very scary, but through this lens of like Leave It to Beaver-ness, you do get this opportunity to watch a scene that normally in any other movie is the most tragic thing, but because it's sort of peppered with a laugh track and it's Rodney Dangerfield, which is a really fascinating choice to me, by the way. Rodney Dangerfield as her
perfect choice.
But it's very specific because if you have anyone else, like imagine like I thought about it, I was like, who at that like 94, who else would be cast? And like to me, the other actor I thought of, not necessarily 94, but like imagine if it was like fucking Chris Cooper. Like Chris Cooper would be like
someone maybe like Carlin, right? Because I think
no, I mean I'm not saying that. I think the choice of comedian as the father is smart. What I'm saying is like if you do this a straight way, you cast like a Chris Cooper who's going to be like the saddest, most depressing, like lecherous person. But because it's Rodney Dangerfield, Carlin's another good choice. Like these older actors or these older comedians, because they're those characters specifically, I think that brings sort of this, like it washes over the movie itself and provides us this levity so that we don't have to focus on this horrific upbringing that Mallory had.
Yeah, see, I actually see that segment very differently in my mind, right? Because one, I think I don't look at it so much as Leave It to Beaver, because they actually do Leave It to Beaver shots at the end, right? They'll do this thing at the end, which is really cool, where it's like a 1950s TV commercial watching the scenes of the jailbreak, right? And it is this like, if only they had known back then the hell that they are bringing into their homes, right? This ticking mutation that's going to infest the family. So the Rodney Dangerfield to me struck more as like a All in the Family or Married with Children, right? This thing where we watch these guys say and do these horrible things, right? And we like I remember watching All in the Children or Married with Children not that long ago and being like, wow, this is like a fucking hardcore show, right? Especially for the things we see now. Like, I mean, it's just this guy constantly talking shit about everyone, and he's really abusive to everyone. And what it does, though, is it becomes this fucking laugh. And it's like, oh, you know, take the facade away. You know, this is very normalized behavior. I think Oliver Stone is constantly trying to tell us that, and I would imagine this is where him and Tarantino kind of break, is that he's saying, because this is one of my big questions I had with the movie, right? It feels like Oliver Stone is saying that this TV lifestyle is to blame. I think that scene in the house is very important because to you, I don't think it gives any levity or pulls me out of the tragedy. Rodney Dangerfield is so out of place. He almost hyper focuses you on how fucking horrendous everything in this
and
moment
levity's not the right word for it. But but what you're saying is exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like I'm not saying Leave It to Beaver. Leave It to Beaver is the example of TV, but the point is not necessarily the content itself. It's the use of TV, of that like visual aspect of it. To me, that's the hyper focused. Is like, oh, I am watching these horrible, horrible people abuse the shit out of their children, abuse the shit out of their daughter in more ways than one. And the point of making it sort of like a sitcom setting and a sitcom arena and putting it in the sitcom arena, I think, is simply to tell a story without having to tell it in a way that, because any other way, you have to spend an inordinate amount of time with those characters and with that story, with that backstory itself. I think because you tell it in this way, which is a visual media, like TV is 23, 22 minutes with commercials, and everything has to happen tightly within that half hour of time you have to make a TV show. So because it's that look, we're already hyper-focused on the fact that we're going to get a lot of story very quickly. So if anything, I think Oliver Stone does a really great job of making a movie, of making a backstory move so fast that we immediately can go to the Mickey of it all and start like focusing more on that. Because I mean, again, we spend so much time on Mallory's backstory. I mean, Mickey's flashbacks are all of 2 minutes in the movie. Mm-hmm. And again, like we get it very quickly. We understand that he had a horrible home life as well, a broken home, terrible place to live, like so on and so forth. But again, we only spend like 2 minutes with him. it's Mallory's story that we're more hyper focused on, because I think in some ways Oliver Stone's trying to say that Mallory is almost, at the start, he almost tries to paint her as nearly blameless. Like, look at this horrible person. Look at this person's horrible life. Why wouldn't she turn to a life of crime, or someone who's exciting, or someone who's going to provide her with some version of stability, because she didn't even have that at home? Granted, almost completely dismantles like within 30 seconds after the whole sitcom bit is over. But I think ultimately Oliver Stone's trying to tell us all that, yes, you need to understand this backstory particularly is most important, because with use of the television look, we're going to tell you that TV informs everything. TV informs everything that happens in this story. And I think actually that's the rub that throws Quentin Tarantino's story out the window, because from what I understand, Quentin Tarantino wrote a story about a couple that just goes on a murder spree, which would make sense given that Quentin Tarantino rarely enters the political arena or anything about the public conversation about mass murder, violence, anything like that. If anything, he's normally the focus of it without realizing it. So I think this is purely Oliver Stone trying to refocus the movie and refocus the story itself on how culpable mass media and the news themselves are for sensationalizing Mickey and Mallory's story itself.
Right, and to that point, I think that's the weirdest part about, I love this scene, right? Because it is something that so many of us struggle with watching, and so many filmmakers struggle. How do you get across the truth and the horror and the trauma of, people being victimized by these moments, right? Especially kids. And I think this is a really clever way to say, hey, this is the kind of shit that, while we're all having laughs, right? Having this horrible fucking patriarch of, a dad and this and that. And because they do that too. They'll cut away to the black and white again and really focus so close on Mallory's sadness and the dad's fucking disgusting creep mouth. He's like, go wash yourself, go. And it's just repulsive, right? And then they cut us back to the laugh track and, smacking his wife around. And it is this magnifying effect on all of the horror. But in this scene is where I kind of find one of my issues with the movie as I've gotten older is, one, I don't think Mallory's a natural-born killer, right? She seems like
I don't
girl
either.
Who could have been
At
okay, right? Mickey seems a little more predisposed to steal a car and whatever,
Right.
And we see that he was traumatized a lot earlier, so it feels like we're saying that Mallory and Mickey are these monstrous creations, right? But here's the problem I see is that after this, the rest of the movie, Oliver Stone does this thing where there's rear projecting on every window, every back wall when sex and depravity and murder is happening, right?
Yeah.
What I learned from the backstory of these two characters is that it does not fucking seem like it's TV's fault, right?
No,
It seems like it's parents victimizing their children and being pieces of
Right.
shit that are to blame.
I mean,
not
I
the
think
fucking
it
TV
only-
show world that we're in.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that it only becomes, again, after you watch the movie is when you can kind of form this opinion. Because to me, the blame that lays at the feet of news, television, current affair, all that shit, because that's really kind of like what they're getting at, is like a current affair and that kind of stuff. Particularly with Robert Downey Jr.'s character and his TV show. Like, only till you're at the end of the movie can you squarely blame that kind of sensationalism. It's not until the end of the movie that you really realize that the point of that entire scene, which again, I think is probably the best scene in the movie, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it's not even close, honestly.
Yeah, like that to me is the genius of Oliver Stone. And again, I'm saying this, and I don't even like this movie. Is the genius of Oliver Stone is you finish that part, you finish this entire movie, and then you think back on that part, and you realize from the jump of this film, without even knowing, you've been informed that TV is bad, TV is evil, TV is the cause of these monsters to be out on the road, and so on and so forth. But it's not them being on TV; it's the TV coming to them. It's a fascinating thing because it's not about like. So often, like, when we were growing up, and I think we talked about this recently with Scream 3, was that, Oh wait, not recently with Scream 3.
We're recording our
cycle.
October specials right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But we talked about how when we were growing up, Columbine was the thing that really shook us to our core. Not just because of the awful atrocities that occurred, but mainly because the initial reaction after was it's music and violent movies that has caused this. This like sickness in children.
Yeah.
So immediately we're like, well, that doesn't make any sense because I watch those movies and I listen to that music and I don't want to murder anybody. Like that's somebody's brain chemistry. That's something else, and that's something else.
This is my
else within
exact
them.
point, though, is that I think what you're saying is that the TV came to them, right? That might be the way, but this is having seen Natural Born Killers and movies way fucking worse and more vile, and having been subjected to news for so long. I can honestly say I'm just fine. Like, maybe I'm less informed than I need to be, but I'm not like a giant threat to society. I'm not running around on like a murder orgy across the desert.
Yeah,
so,
I like to think I'm not.
Right. So I had to square it in my mind because, again, maybe I think what they're saying is that because we see Rodney Dangerfield watching wrestling, right? This aggressive display of masculinity when he's kind of this dumpy old fuck, doing these horrible things, that perhaps what they're saying is that TV had already done the damage by the time we start. And that by crumbling that family and the Leave It to Beaver reality of the 50s, which, again, I don't think is a real thing we should celebrate either. I think that's just fucking nonsense, too. But no. I think maybe they're saying that Rodney Dangerfield's group was already ruined, and thus they're ruining the children. And that's the weird thing, too, is that Mallory and Mickey feel like they were going to do this journey despite the news coverage, right? The news coverage may have been something that they then began to play with, right? Because we do get the, even in the first scene where it's like, we have to leave this, neckbeard alive because someone has to tell the tale. And so they by that point, they are cognizant. But we don't know how, they talk about, by the time we first hear, Wayne, whatever his fucking name is, they've already killed 40-some people. Mm-hmm. Right? And how long was it until the media started catching up? So, again, he's blaming the media, but they're already doing all this stuff. He's blaming TV, but that's not what caught. So this is where it just feels disconnected. Because I don't know that any viewer would make the case that the way that our news exists is not the most helpful, best version it could be. No one's going to make that case. No one's going to make the case that, young kids should be watching horrendous stuff on TV, just have free access. No one's going to make those arguments. My question to myself at the end was, did Oliver Stone make them in an interesting and insightful way? And there are scenes perhaps, but I feel like the overall thread of this is kind of a societal ill, right? This mutagen of the masses. I don't think that comes through. But my case to you as to why I don't think that's bad and why I do love the movie is because the actors in this movie are so fucking outstanding that even if it's a little sloppy and it's a little in your face, which is, obviously the point, I would watch this cast and these characters specifically do any fucking story for 3 hours. Like, I fucking love every character in this movie, and it's just it's a fun journey.
Yeah, I think that every actor is perfectly cast in this movie. There's not a single thing performance-wise I would ever take back. Like, I think all of them are awesome. The fact that Robert Downey Jr. was able to get Oliver Stone to agree to let him do this whole thing in an Australian accent is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that seemed like a weird flex. I was like, I don't understand.
Apparently he had watched like a news program with some guy who was just like this guy and begged to be able to do this in an Australian accent. I'm like, whatever. It's Robert Downey Jr. At that point,
honestly, that is Wayne's journey is probably the one that most matches up with what Oliver Stone wants us to take away. He's a man who comes over here and picks the bones of tragedy, and then in the end is completely consumed by it.
Right, and this is the thing that this is the part that I don't necessarily like about the movie. Because you're right, the performances are amazing. Besides the visual style, which just doesn't really vibe with me, particularly just for this time. Like, I've watched many Oliver Stone movies, and he does this with he does multimedia filming all the time. Like, it doesn't necessarily bother me. Like, in Any Given Sunday is a great example that he does where he does this. But like, Robert Downey Jr.'s character and the general vibe, like, they don't show up until much later in the movie. And to me, and again, this is a long movie. We've talked about it on this show. Like, movies don't really need to be more than 90 minutes. This one really doesn't need to be more than 90 minutes.
That's like, our personal picadillo, though.
Like, it really doesn't need to be more than 90 minutes long. But this movie particularly feels also like two halves of a whole, because we spend a lot of time following Mickey and Mallory around. And we spend a lot of time learning their story, learning about their love or whatever it is, their feelings towards each other, even though, like, it feels like Mickey is constantly trying to get Mallory to just do a threesome, like, constantly. I don't care.
Mickey has been laying pipe the whole time. Like,
yeah, like
he keeps calling them hostages.
Right. Yeah. So Mickey's like trying to polygamize this entire relationship, which is, again, a really fascinating thing when you think about it for Mallory, and this thing we were talking about earlier, where she's not necessarily full of blame. Like, I would say there's portions of
killer, right? She didn't.
I would say she's not a natural born killer.
Around.
Right.
Well, that actually leads me to one of my favorite things about the film, right? Is that what I really love about this movie is that I think Juliette Lewis and Woody Harrelson just are absolute. It's like one of those lightning in a bottle things that you hear about. They are so perfectly cast, and their chemistry is enormous. But the thing that I really love about the Mickey and Mallory journey is this kind of weird code of honor amongst thieves that they have. Like Mickey having the audacity to be mad that she's not wearing a ring when clearly he's been fucking other people, right? Clearly they're murderers. Clearly they're cheats. They're cop kill. They've done all kinds of horrendous crimes.
Right.
And he's fucking other women. But he's really mad when she takes off the ring, right? Like, those moments to me matter a lot. And I think that's what is great about this movie, right? Like, the scene that really jumped out to me on this viewing that I absolutely loved is when Mallory's angry, right? You know, do you still think I'm attractive, blah, blah, blah. Woody's doing his Woody thing, and he's going to go out and, find a lady probably. And she goes to the body shop. And as the guy is walking into her, right, we start to get this, like, green like, there's a lot of greens and reds and blacks and white, right? We get this green fantasy, right? And green is kind of a calmer color than the others we see. And when the guy is approaching her, she imagines made-for-TV Mickey, right? He's got, like, the Leon outfit on, right? The professional. Yeah. And that's who she's imagining as this guy comes up. And then it cuts to the sad reality of this guy trying to just kind of get it while he can with this woman he's seen on TV. And that reality crumbling around her moment in seeing her have to run back to Mickey. And then we see them kind of bonding again. Like that the weird ups and downs of this horrible relationship with these horrible people, but they still see it is this kind of island from, the horrors of the world. I found that endlessly fascinating on this viewing. I mean,
that's what makes Mickey and Mallory watchable characters, because otherwise they're just murdering psychopaths, and I think that gets that gets kind of boring after the fifth person you've seen them murder on screen. I mean, this is the thing, though. Let me ask you this, right? Because there are a couple moments I'll have you react to where I'm like, I feel like this movie, as I've gotten, I remember seeing this in college and it just vibed with me. I was like, yeah, woo. It's like this and Fight Club. There's a whole era of these young adolescent men movies. That Fight Club, Boondock Saints, everyone had that poster up. Like, this fucking speaks to me, man. Fucking burn it down, do push-ups, punch people, woo. You know what I mean? Drive around and have sex on whatever furniture you want. Now that I'm a married guy, that part still is appealing. But there are weird moments where I do wonder if there's a version of this movie, right, where maybe we never see Mickey and Mallory except for these hyper-sensationalized media versions, right? Yeah. Because I think Scagnetti feels like a really weird shoehorned-in character that I love.
But
Yeah.
him being in the story just feels extra, and I don't know that it's making an enormous point that we need. Tommy Lee Jones playing Harvey Dent again, was awesome. But,
it was
again,
great.
not like an enormous point. Like, we get it. Police also can be not good guys.
Right.
That has
Trust
never
me, we
gone
know.
away. But it's just one of those, like, I'm trying to get... I wonder if there's a way where Wayne becomes our main protagonist, and he's hunting down and editing and creating this mythical version of these characters.
I mean,
and I wonder if that makes that ending a little better.
Well, I 100% agree with you that this movie, it's fascinating because this movie's made this way, and again, it's lasted as long as it has because it is a good movie. But I agree with you, and personally, I think it's a better movie by telling this story through the lens of Wayne's character. Like, Wayne is the story we're supposed to be, like, focusing in on. Like, if Oliver Stone's thesis is to blame the media for us sensationalizing murder, and not only sensationally, but like desensitizing and normalizing violence in the media, then Robert Downey Jr.'s character, who is this frenetic, psychotic, like, Geraldo Rivera type individual, that's like the whole point of the movie itself. So the fact that he comes in my opinion, way too late in the movie. Yeah. Like, I know he comes in early enough, but it is not... this should have started with what you're talking about. Like, I think about, like, those actors who they have pretending to be Mallory and Mickey, like, that for his show. That's how this movie should begin.
That scene was really fun. I like that part.
It's fucking blast. And that's, like, that to me is how this should begin. And, like, in my opinion, this movie works so much better if we actually don't meet Mallory and Mickey until prison interviews. That to me
I wondered that myself because
is almost more brutal.
Yeah, it feels like the whole point is, and I guess there's a way you can look at this movie where, because every time we see them, other than the bridge, right, where they get married, the bridge is pretty earnest, but almost too much so, right, where it feels very soapy. There is a way
I think that's
kind
of what's interesting about
that we
it's
never
interesting you brought up the ring.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, right? There's a way to look at every scene we see with Mickey and Mallory. This weird creed of the outlaw code they're following, all this stuff. There's a way to look at this where everything we do see about them is false narrative anyways. And it is this hyper realized version of these two individuals. So maybe Oliver Stone thinks that that's what he was doing already. Right? But
very well
to
could
me,
be.
I mean, felt, because that's the thing, they play it, that I love the earnestness of how they're showing their love. And that clearly, like, I grew up, I love, like, Unsolved Mysteries was like family watching for us every week. And so, like, I love those kind of shows, and they never showed people being earnest on those shows. So it feels like that's not, we're not watching Wayne's TV show version of them a lot. But there is that moment too. So maybe, I don't know if that is better, because I love the scene when Woody Harrelson sees himself on TV at the pharmacy and gets a little chuckle out of it as he's dying from rattlesnake venom and he's about to shoot this overweight pharmacist. I was like, that's just awesome that he's seeing himself and thinks that it's, a hoot.
Right. I mean, I can see a world in which that works, and I think that functions really well if you watch the movie assuming that this is part of the show. Yeah. I think that works really well. And again, I mean, obviously from a filmmaking standpoint, the reason you don't do what we're suggesting is because you have Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis who are playing off each other like bandits, literally. Right. So there's no reason to not use them in every fucking scene you can. I just think, I wonder if the impact...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wonder if the impact of the story is lessened because we've been with them the entire time. So when we get to this big third act with the jailbreak and all this crazy shit that goes down, I almost feel like it's a little bit less impactful because we've seen them do crazy shit the entire time. So I know they're capable of it. I think that's the thing that maybe that's what I've always been missing, is that I know they're capable of breaking out of prison because I've seen them do insane shit this entire movie. So rather than seeing these weird avatars on television of like weird, bad, unsolved mystery actors doing crazy shit, I finally get to see the real thing. I've already seen them do the real thing over and over again. So it's almost like we are becoming desensitized to their capabilities themselves.
Yeah, and it definitely is a movie that wants us to be desensitized and wants to rev us up where we're praying for them to do brutality. Because then when the movie ends, we have to be like, oh, that's weird. Like, I shouldn't like that as much. But, like here's an example. The opening scene, right? It's the second movie this month. We watched Darkman with the Wilson brothers, and I was like, I don't know that I've ever seen bullet POV of it flying through a brain. That's cool. This movie has that in the opening scene as well. So that opening scene plays exactly like some kind of trashy Lifetime movie version of these characters.
Totally.
Right? Scagnetti plays exactly like one of those characters. You know, even that scene when they're running around getting the Rattler poison and all that, or the anti-venom, and Scagnetti's out there with the cops and the foreign film crew's out there like, you know, Mickey looks virile. He has a giant gun, which is amazing, right? Even those moments they all play like the Lifetime movie, right? I would just argue, and they do that so well, and you can do that with Mickey and Mallory, right? The bridge scene is maybe a bit earnest, but them talking while they're taking pisses simultaneously, and he's like, that's poetry. I was like, I love that scene because it's these people on this cosmic journey just literally taking the piss out of the scene. And I was like, so there's a way that works. I don't know. I'm with you. I feel the movie is slightly disjointed here and there. But again, like even I would argue Tommy Lee Jones' character has no value to this movie other than he is fun as shit to watch on the screen. Like he has no narrative function. But
that's really
he's amazing. So I mean that's what I think this movie does well.
Right. Again, like my picadillos with the movie itself are strictly with my preference for style and filmmaking. There's no way I could ever take away that this movie is a great critique on mass media. It's a great story with great characters. You just made us sound
like film Twitter. You know, no, that's cool down there with you plebs. I just prefer art. You know?
No, this is art. Again, it's one of those things where
I know where your heart is. I'm just saying it sounded like one of those funny. No, I'm glad all you losers like this. I just know the better fields.
No, I get it. It sounds shockingly douchey. But like again, this is all based on preference. Like I have a preference. Like Oliver Stone's not one of my favorite filmmakers, but I also know that I've watched a lot of Oliver Stone movies. Yeah. So clearly I have no problem watching Oliver Stone movies anyways.
I would say this. Oliver is almost always interesting though.
Yes,
like
he always makes an interesting movie, no matter what.
Yeah, I agree with you. This movie feels a little disjointed. Our lens feels off. But again, it kind of fits this chaotic vibe. Like when I watch this, I remember what it was like to be a teenage boy watching this. And the thing that was startling to me is back then it made perfect sense and was streamlined. And I think that's what the movie is somewhat reminding us too, is that when we are younger and impressionable and we see all these horrors of the system, which again, this feels very prevalent to today, right? I mean,
very much so.
You're literally one or two extra scenes. Like if you did a director's cut of this movie where you saw, Mallory posing with a dead body with like bunny ears on Snapchat, them like doing one of the hostages in a hotel on a live story on Instagram. Right. This is the exact same movie and it fits perfectly today.
I mean, this is the one movie I'd say that's been made in the last, like, this is the one like classic film that I would say if you updated it, like let's say some asshole decided to remake this movie, I actually probably wouldn't have a problem with it as long as it was made well. Because honestly, like, you can update this for relevance to today. And I mean, it's relevant from 94. If you just update it 20 years, it's still going to be relevant. Like I think is the power of this movie.
On that, because I truly do not think you can I would, honest to God, even though I've said I think it's a little off kilter at times, I think this is on the unremakeable list. I think if you make a movie where it's more of a streamlined narrative and you take out all of the insanity, right, and you take out those actors,
right,
and then you have this new crew trying to like do a Tom Sizemore character, I don't think you could remake this movie successfully. I think there are other
Oh
versions
no,
of this
I think
movie.
this is well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we already talked about the other version of this movie you could make. Like, I'm not saying you remake this movie shot for shot, where this isn't Gus Van Sant making Psycho. What I'm saying is you can take the very core narratives of this movie.
The only guy who gets to remake it is Tarantino. You would pay for that. I would pay for that.
Oh, totally. But like, again, Tarantino would make a completely different movie that has like nothing to do with this.
Well, I'm saying though, riddle me this though. You don't love it as much, right? Would you rather watch this version? Do you think this version's more interesting, or Mickey and Mallory just talking about their favorite episode of Green Acres while they hack up a body?
I don't disagree that Quentin Tarantino's version of this movie might be a little more off.
Yeah. You know why I'm chopping your kneecap off? Because in season 3, episode 5 of Kung Fu, you know,
sure. I mean,
David Carradine did both.
There's a version of this movie that, like, Quentin Tarantino apparently tried to make this and like unsuccessfully directed it for like $500,000.
Yeah.
I would kill to see that movie, but I also know that it would be about as interesting as The Hateful Eight. Shots fired. I did not like The Hateful Eight, so there you go.
We saw True Romance, and if you put a gun to my head, which movie do I like more, and which would I probably watch going forward more often? I like Natural Born Killers better. Right? There is a freneticness to it I like. I think True Romance is awesome. Sure. But that felt like more the movie Tarantino wishes this was.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I'd say as far as remakeability, what I mean is I would not remake this movie. I would take the core themes of this film, which are pretty universal and pretty easily molded to a more whatever context you want to put them in. Mm-hmm. And you take those themes, you take those characters. You don't necessarily do this movie because, honestly, this is, again, it's Oliver Stone, Woody Harrelson, and Juliette Lewis. Like, you can't undo those flavors.
Yeah.
But what you do is you take those themes, modernize them a little bit, and, you know, obviously now there's even more media than there was back then. So, if anything, this movie is hyper relevant right now. If you remake this, it becomes probably a little more difficult to watch because there's so much information to like filter through, but the themes themselves are very remakeable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people will make movies that tackle this issue, right? We've seen a lot of these social media driven killers and this and that. I think what I really love about this one is, you know, and even I agree with you, the third act in the prison to me has a lot of great stuff. I don't think it's wildly, because, again, it feels like I kind of know how we're doing it, right? But, again, they always find these little great like, just Wayne and Woody going at it, right? Like, Robert Downey and Woody, you're like, yeah, fuck yeah. Yeah, Tommy Lee Jones and Scagnetti, right? Scagnetti in the cell. Like, there's just awesome shit in every scene. And, again, is it all streamlined and focused? No. And that'll always be my thing with the movie. But what I think happens is that prison scene, and the way Tommy Lee Jones is playing it, and the way they're cutting to his, like, his little chortles, and, you know, all of this, you're like, none of that is how it really happened. Absolutely none of that. The prison riot itself is bananas. You're like, this is now the, you know, Lifetime movie of the Wayne story. So I think those little extra layers of just insanity that I think me and you, when watching this time, were like, oh, that feels like Oliver Stone just being very sloppy with his, you know, stroke.
Right. And I mean,
I think it in a way shields it for time to come.
Sure. I think that's the other thing that when I because I took a couple of days with it, and I realize now maybe the disjointedness that I feel and the thing that I don't like about it is not necessarily a bad thing. And here's why. Mm-hmm. Is mainly because the point of this movie is that absolutely no one in it is telling the truth. There is no one in this movie at a single moment that has told the fucking truth. So this movie is filled with unreliable narrators, and particularly and chiefly the camera being the most unreliable narrator. I have no idea what I'm seeing is true or not true. Yeah. So that disjointedness is a great thematic choice because that's the entire point that Oliver Stone's trying to make, especially by the end of the movie, which is that there is no truth. There is the version of the truth. It's what we've seen in the media for the last, 4 years, which is It's an alternate fact. It's an alternate truth. It's an alternate reality that these people live in as opposed to what the general populace lives in. For me, this came out in 94, so I was living in Silver Spring, Maryland. So I'm living in Silver Spring, Maryland and watching all this shit go down in Texas, for instance. So you imagine this. I don't know what's true. I don't live there. That's not something I'm necessarily informed of. All I know is what's true is what's outside my street. So to me personally, the more I sat with it, the better the unreliable narrator concept, particularly of the camera, works and actually engages me in the story in a way that I hadn't been engaged with, particularly the first time I watched it. So
yeah, well, like a great example of is Mickey escaping prison the first time. So we see Mickey in a sandstorm. We see this cartoonish tornado in the distance, but that's real.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then as he's escaping and they're following him on a horse, the fact they're not unloading shotguns straight up, right? All right, whatever. But when they cut to the rattlesnake nipping at the horse, it's red. And I was like, is that supposed to be the devil himself is helping it? You know? And it's like, it just felt like, why is the tornado shown as real when we know it? This is what I think, right? If you had just shown me a tornado creates a dust storm and he fucking rides off like he's Wile E. Coyote, you're like, yeah, I get it.
Oh yeah,
like that's unreliable narration. Period. It's the extra stuff, and like I was really watching it when I watched it again. I watched it twice actually. When I was watching it again, I was trying to watch the background images in the hotel, like when Scagnetti chokes the hooker, and when Mallory, and it just felt like someone literally just flipped the channels, and it's like, here's animals killing each other, and you're like, Are you saying that contributes to the downfall? Animals fucking on TV. And you're like, is that a bad image we're not supposed to see?
Right.
Because I think that stuff doesn't work. But then splash cutting Mickey's interview with the Coca-Cola bear works wildly well.
It does.
And so,
I mean, it's the same thing like with the scene where the shaman, where they're doing like the scene with the Native American guy who's trying to like pull the demons out of them. This is another great example of like, there's no way this this almost assuredly did not happen. What they probably did was they showed up and blew this guy away and then ran off into the rattlesnake desert.
Well,
like
it's the weird one because one, it's like Oliver Stone. I get it. You've like YouTubed some history. Like, come on, dude. Like, I get it. Like, you know, why do we have to just, you know, hey, make sure we get another American atrocity in here. And that's fine. That's cool. It felt just added in, but that is the weird. I feel like the movie, I was kept wondering, like, why are they worried about killing this guy?
Yeah,
like,
that's
why
the
was
one
it that guy?
Mallory
and they
kind
tried
of
to
freaks
say,
out
oh,
about.
he was trying to help us. And you're like, by what? Getting you stoned as fuck? Like, that scene felt a little. I feel like it was just Oliver Stone's like, I want to talk about what we did to Native Americans.
Well, yeah. I mean,
in the middle
that,
of my
I
media is the
think
worst
that,
movie.
I mean, there's that, but I also think Oliver Stone's trying to tell us, well, the movie itself is trying to tell us that there's a fairly decent chance this didn't happen. Like, almost near certainty that this didn't happen. And if it did, it so didn't happen this way that what you have to do is trust the entertainment value you have. And that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is if you're going to show me, like, if you show me a Christopher Nolan scene and a scene from, like, I don't know, like a Christopher Nolan scene of Batman and the Joker talking, and then you show me the same scene in the Batman 66 version, you know, I'm honestly going to probably watch the Batman 66 version because it's visually way more entertaining.
Hot take! No.
You know what I mean? Again, my eyes are drawn it. To, you know, all of our eyes are drawn to more colors. So immediately I'm going to like look over towards what's shiny and new and weird about this. Like, that I think is the most important part about the unreliable narrator theory within this movie is that he's constantly with this frenetic thing that, you know, obviously fucks with me and it doesn't really work for me in a lot of ways, but maybe it does. And that's the whole point. Me not thinking it works might be the entire point of me not liking it. Is that I want the truth. I'm searching for the truth, and I'm not going to get it through this entire movie.
True, man. You don't want it to be true.
Exactly. But that's another great point. I don't. Who wants it to be true that these two people killed 50 people? That's horrible. So you have to
Depends on
address
who
those
they are, I guess,
atrocities
now.
by living with that, by living with the fantasy that there's a good chance this actually happened this way. Or
Yeah, I
didn't.
think there's
You never know.
there's two for sure moments that are supposed to clue us in as an audience. Or I would say three, right? So Wayne in the prison, heroically fighting, that's my camera. I was like, oh, you're letting us know, like, the camera's the boat and this is not real. Fine. The other scene was, so there's a moment where they're fighting their way out of the prison, right? They've kind of did the, like, you can't, you're on live TV. And Tommy Lee Jones is just sitting there. What kind of Texas prison guard wouldn't want to blow fucking Mickey and Mallory away on TV? You would be elected to Senate immediately, right? So there is this, the media's holding them hostage, but a really cool small scene in that, a small moment, right? There's one cameraman who's kind of walking around, and the POV was getting a little wonky, I realized. Well, there's a scene where Juliette Lewis turns around and says, get back. And she's not talking to the camera. If I read it right, she's talking to us, the audience.
Yeah.
Right? We're fucking getting in now. And so
that's
there's
like
all
the
these
bleed.
moments of untruth, but the one that really sank it for me was Wayne Gale being heroic in death and doing the pose, right? The Jesus pose. I was like, not a chance in hell. Like, we all know that guy, and he would have been on his knees groveling, anything. He's not going to have this, like, moment of strength and resolution. Like, I'm glad to be on the back of the A block on ABC News tonight, and gets wasted. That was when the movie's telling you, this, you cannot trust it because it is media.
Right. Well, and I think that's, again, I truly love that moment where she grabs the lens and pushes the film camera away. Like, the scene in which we're filming and watching right now is untrue. Yeah. That's the thing I love the most. That's what I loved the most, is like that. It's like the most odd fourth wall break I've ever seen in a movie, and it works so well simply because within the context of this film, you have no idea which camera is telling you the truth. So,
but that one is not even a camera. You can see the cameraman in the back while she pushes get back, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, that's really fucking cool, man.
But that's the whole thing. Like, she's pushing the film camera. She's pushing the audience POV back. So now she's addressing us particularly.
Yeah. But that's again, to wrap this up, right? Is like, that's what I think what the movie does. Again, I think it's like, you know, just throwing in the genocide of the Native Americans that we perpetrated on them. I was like, I get it, but why is that Mickey and Mallory's responsibility, and why is that TV's responsibility? Maybe he's saying, like, hey, there's horrible shit that we're not learning about because of Mickey's and Mallory's and their Beatle-like, you know, appeal.
Sure.
But I think that's the thing, right? The characters are wild and fun. They have that kind of recreating true crime vibe that we like, while none of the crimes seem very real at all.
Right.
And I think this movie could have been called Natural Born Boomers, right? Like, you know, it's just like, we hate TV and we hate youngins and we hate, like, I get it. But the sloppiness and the awesomely wild performances, and it just all kind of congeals for me, right? And it reminded me of the scene when Woody's getting taken into the courtroom. And, you know, as Mickey, he just goes, you ain't seen nothing yet. And all the girls are like, yeah! That's kind of how we feel when we turn on Natural Born Killers, right? Is you're like, it doesn't matter as much that, you know, it's like this opus magnum where every little stylistic choice works. It creates this fucking wildly violent wonderland that, you know, we just had the Tea Party with, you know, all these fucking crazy, empty stereotypes of characters. And it really works for me. I don't know. I've always thought this movie worked. Not as much. I was like, looking back, I was like, what kind of little monster was young, like 18-year-old Josh Griffey? Where like this was like a roadmap. I was like, this is how it should be, man. This is fucking how it should be.
I think this movie works when you unpack all of its narrative value. Yeah. I personally still don't like some of the aspects of the filmmaking style that Oliver Stone employs here. But again,
how dare you?
It's not like I'm not used to Oliver Stone making movies like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me put it this way. Oliver Stone in real life decision making is way harder to accept often than his movie making.
Absolutely. I'll give you that 100 times.
Yeah.
I'll give you that every day and twice on Sunday. I don't understand Oliver Stone in general, so the fact that I can gather any semblance of theme from his movies is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and of all his movies, this feels like the one that's made for me and not my uncles. So I appreciate that. You know, it's
not a 3-hour. It's not a 3-hour whodunit about JFK.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Carmelita is actually, I'm friends with her on Letterboxd. She gave this movie a perfect 5 out of 5. So I would say I'm closer to Carmelita than you. I was so glad to rewatch this. I really was. It had been a long time. That's it, guys, for Natural Born Killers. I hope you liked it as much as I did and Carmelita did. As always, please take a second, leave us a rating.
I liked it too. Fuck you.
How dare you? Don't interrupt me. I'm going to be like that commercial of the Native American who cries when people litter upon his land. That's me when I'm doing my outros. And you just throw verbiage at me. Leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcasts app. Follow the YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Nerd Alchemist, that's plural with an S at the end, on YouTube. Find us on all your social medias. Let us know stuff you want to hear talked about. We'll do that. And email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. So that was Natural Born Killers. The next up on the fan selection, The Skin I Live In, which will be tomorrow. So tune in for that. This has been a great jaunt through Listener Picks Month. We appreciate all the help with that, guys. For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.